All right, thank you very much. We are back here on Wednesday, January, whatever it is, 28th, 2026. We have Logan from the JFO in the seat, and he has brought us our, as I recall, a former chair from Ferrisburg saying the budget on a page or the transportation budget on a page or something. I don't know if she started or it was before that. Our resident historian will probably have a comment on that, but with that, you should find a big handout in your seat that you should recognize from last year. And with that, I welcome you back to committee, Logan, and if you can start walking us through these, I would appreciate it.
Sure thing. For the record, Logan Newberry from the Joint Fiscal Office. I will share my screen shortly. I could get a link. Oh, perfect. Yeah, these documents are the same format as you saw last year. Those of you here before that, the year before, and the past few years at least, just with new numbers. These numbers reflect what is in the white book and the testimonies that have been given from all the different departments as they've come in. Let's walk through them shortly. It's fighting me.
Fighting you?
Fighting me.
Oh.
Again. All right, that looks correct. So we'll start with the one with the yellow bar. It says Transportation Appropriations Overview and Budget by Fund, FY27 GovRec. So the yellow bar at the top, or orange bar. So these are the numbers as you sort of have seen them in the white book, just sort of laid out by the different funds. So the colored column there is the total of all funds added up together. And then you have your fund categories out there: T-fund, federal, local/others, interdepartment transfers, TIP funds, and internal service funds. And then the left-hand column is just how they're broken out by the different departments, and the sort of B900 section, which is related to the big bill and how they'll show up in the budget for the year. But and go through some of these. I don't know if there's any specific questions on these. You'll notice the total program development taking up a very large portion of the budget. Yes.
Okay, I'm just for simplicity's sake, I'm gonna start right there at the top, B910, Department of Motor Vehicles. So that 5.5% would tell me that out of that $51 million, that's 5.5% of the $934 million total.
Correct.
Okay, and then if I go further to the right of the 51 million, those are made up of T funds, $46 million, plus the almost 5 million in federal, plus the 122. If I take all the columns to the right of it, they're gonna add up back to the 51 million.
They should. Yep.
Okay, and so everywhere down this column on the left, if you want to see where we spend our largest shares of money, that's an easy spot, quick, that's the percentage of the grand total of the budget.
Correct.
There is not a column that says the grand total of, or the percentage of the T funds, right? But we can kind of eyeball that pretty easily. But put that on a parking lot note of a potential consideration as a very small column somewhere that shows how much of our
Sure. Yeah,
money we're spending. But that doesn't, because obviously the biggest one down there in maintenance and they go down from there, but it doesn't mean we have to add that. It's just kind of an interesting how much of our T funds we spend, but that's the structure is in effect, those are the percentage of the grand total and each of the columns to the right. It is important for us to always remember where's the money coming from. So that's my simplicity piece of it. Representative White, you got a question?
Yes, thank you for that overview, Chair. That's helpful. And could you, like, what's the interdepartment? Again, that's money coming from one department going into the T fund or going
Yeah.
out or?
yeah, that's a way you can think about it. So it's money moving around sort of interdepartmentally, and a lot of these,
But not within just the transportation department.
No,
within
so-
the entire state government.
a lot of these, and we could look into sort of the black book numbers and see exactly where come from, things related to sort of like FEMA match or stuff like that, which might be housed in a different area of government, but is being used for transportation programs. They do sort of interdepartmental transfers. I believe that's what those two that equal about 10 million in the program development. Again, we could go online and see for sure exactly what they are, but I'm guessing they're related to some sort of federal emergency funding for certain projects, and it's just being shifted around. And I guess I don't know.
We can kind of come down. Just come down it a little bit at a time and point out some of the things that you tend to look at quickly or jump out at you or just to help keep walking through it. And then everybody can go into their own questions at another point.
Two, and I guess I don't know how in depth you want to get here too. The previous question, I can show you all where to sort of find exactly what those interdepartmental transfers refer to if you want to jump over and look at some of the black book numbers, or we can go through this first. Just if there are more questions about like what the numbers actually
Let's go
represent.
kind of down and then when we want to dig into something more specific, we'll do that
That's perfect.
after we make sure that everybody understands the full. We went across, I didn't go down and break it down, come down. I broke it across columns, but I didn't really break it across rows to look at it that way. So let's go down for a while and then we'll get as specific as anybody wants to.
Yeah, so under the B903 program development, this is sort of the largest chunk. These are the projects you all been hearing about. Paving, 16% of the budget almost this year, 148 million, largely federally funded. Some other large ones, as the chair mentioned, if you go down sort of the middle of the page, B905 is maintenance. This is, I believe, the single largest source of T fund spending. It's 109 million this year. This is usually almost always state funds. There are sometimes federal funds involved, as you can see here. I think these federal funds are also involved with some sort of emergency, maybe a flooding repairs that were done, and we got reimbursed for those. But it's normally the largest source of transportation funds within the budget. Rail is another large one, 60 million. A mix of funds here. A lot of it comes from the federal funds. There's also some TID funds, which, as you all remember, is for longer term projects like bridges or rail infrastructure, stuff like that. There are also some federal funds in there. A new program this year is the Rail Trail, which I don't know if you've heard about that one yet. It's been broken out into the B907.1 section. So that'll be new compared to last year, but I think the agency can speak on why they sort of broke that out if they haven't already. Central Garage, B909, that's our internal service fund. As you remember, and you probably heard from Ernie's presentation, Central Garage gets a payment from all the other sort of areas of the transportation department that use the equipment and the fleet there. So they all pay into this internal service fund, and that's how they sort of fund their stuff. That blue line.
So, yeah, thank you. So I guess it's fair to say the central garage, I mean, although it shows the money coming from the other departments, is made up of state, federal,
Yep.
funding. But probably the majority of it goes to maintenance, is in service of maintenance, so the majority of it probably is state funding.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine almost all of it is state funding. And yeah, the funds you see there in central garage are not like new, they're kind of considered like duplicate funds. So they exist within the maintenance budget as well, and they show up here. This is how we show up for sort of transparency, but they are within the other budget lines that you sort of see here.
Okay, I just want to go back to that, Logan. So the maintenance line of $112 million, the central garage line of $26 million is included in that $112 million and then also appears separately?
Yeah, so not in its entirety, but and I'd have to go back and look to see what portion of it. A large portion of the money that Central Garage gets through this internal service fund comes from maintenance because they use, snowplows and stuff like that. But it's a mechanism for an accounting mechanism for having the people within the agency that use the equipment pay the people that are maintaining the equipment.
So 26 million is coming from maintenance to central garage because they're using a lot of all the
Equipment.
trucks and plows that central garage
Right.
maintains.
And it's probably not other areas also pay into the central garage, but maintenance is just the largest. So I don't know if the entire 26, I'm guessing, is not all from maintenance, but I don't know what the breakdown is.
If another group in the rail had a pickup truck for getting to and from different sections of the rail, they would pay for that pickup truck for fleet to manage it, buy it, maintain it.
Yeah.
Right. So there would be so when you look at the P&L of the operating expenses of that section, that they would show that they have to pay into central garage because they use a couple of pickup trucks.
Yep, essentially how it works.
And so you probably we hear about these, the Ford electric trucks are used in 2 or 3 different departments. They must pay back to central garage in effect so that their operating expenses look like what it costs them.
Yeah.
But it gets lumped up into Dave's group to take care of them all, purchase them all,
Yeah.
and sell them all eventually.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps, but that's the way I understand it. Representative Casey?
So transportation must disperse out some funds yearly to each one of the garages, right?
Yeah, I would imagine. I don't know.
It starts out that way, and that's
exactly how
how they
they're
pay.
allocated, but yeah.
That's how they pay back to Central Garage for rent on a dump truck. Right?
Yeah, so they get their money through
The wash,
the
right,
budget
yeah.
somewhere. Yeah, it's not new money coming. It's sort of a duplicated money. It's just the way that we sort of account for it within the budget. Sort of see what those totals are, but it's not money that exists outside of what it's being appropriated to any of these sort of
Yeah,
sections.
I haven't noticed the garage near me do any fundraisers or any donut
Right.
sales or nothing like that, so I assume it came from somewhere.
Yeah. So the first blue line on the page is the total what we consider V-Trans program. So these are all the sort of things that the department is doing themselves. This is the vast majority of the budget. You see 90% there. 844 million in projects, all the main things here. And then below that, we get into sort of the town highway programs. And this is sort of money or funding that goes out to towns. The big ones are the town highway bridges, which you'll notice are largely federally funded. There is some local match, I'm assuming, and some TID money in there. The other ones that you all worked on last year was town highway structures and the class 2 roadway programs. And then the other large one is the town highway aid program, which I know we discussed last year. That's sort of the largest chunk of state dollars, T-fund dollars that goes out to towns so that they can use to maintain roads and the likes. Second blue line is the town highway programs total 9.6%. makes up the rest. About 89 million or 89 and a half, a little over a million this year. And then you get the total. 934 million all told. Most of that, good portion of it is federal funds, 515 million and 331 million in state dollars.
Representative Keating?
Thank you. So this explains that line item, that non-duplicative budget or something like that.
Yeah.
When you take that 26 million, that's, so really that 934.7 million is less 26 million in actual dollars.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay,
That is also a correct way to think about it.
okay.
Yeah.
And I know you didn't put this accounting together.
Right.
But there's other ways to do that. Okay, thank you.
So I guess one of the pieces that I would, there's a couple, well, we're gonna, part of the committee discussion will go as we continue to go through this, but so 15% of the T funds go to our towns. Take 49 million, almost 50 million out of 331 million, 332 million in T funds. We give about 15% to our towns.
Yeah.
It's not on there. No, it's 9.6 of the total budget.
Of the total.
But that's where part of where I'm saying that we might want another column that shows what's the percentage of T funds, because the T funds are 50 million that in effect we control to some degree or another. They're tied to lots of programs, but we as a state have 331 million. We give 50 million of it to the towns through various programs. Probably it's more than that in terms of, because a lot of these projects up above, bike beds, et cetera, obviously they're all done in these towns. So it's, I don't want to paint that picture too tightly that in terms of that how much we do or don't give, but it would be one of my long-term objectives if I were to be here long-term to see whether that percentage is the right amount and what we could do about that, or you have to grow the bigger number in order to get more for your towns. But that's part of the reason I'm wondering, we may want to add that chart is because, so we give about 15% plus inside all these other projects, they're done in somebody's town. It may be a state highway, but it's on somebody's town property, I guess, if you'd say, or it's in their town limits. So it's a little bit misleading when we say that we only give X amount to towns, but that's part of one of the numbers that I look at and think about historically, whether we're helping them or do they deserve a bigger portion, or does we have to grow the whole pie in order to grow their share of the pie? Those are kind of some of the things that I think about when I represent my town, and I know the struggles they have to keep up with their infrastructure with the huge increase in expense.
Has it funding been flat for quite a few years now for towns?
That's a great question for Logan, because some things are up and some things are down. That's probably a little bit on this next sheet too.
So I would have to go back and look at the entirety of what we send to towns to see what the growth sort of has been or hasn't been if you take in all of these programs. The only one I know for certain is the Town Highway Aid Program. For a few years in the past, it was level funded. In the past few years, it has been increasing, but before then, and I would have to go back and look to see how many years ago, there was a period of time where it was level funded for that specific program. But in entirety, I would have to go back and look at the numbers to see if it was level or not.
Yeah, and I'm guessing this year it went up, I think, 2.9%. The town class 2 roadway, 2.7. And we put last year in an inflationary
You did, yeah.
figure,
Yeah.
assuming that's exactly what that was.
Yeah. So
It'd
those,
be interesting to sort of walk through that, as a little exercise. Here's what it was.
Okay.
And it was a complicated way that it was designed, but exactly how it kicked in this year and how it got there.
yeah, I
And the purpose of that was to keep at least this one line item that every town relies on for their roadways, maintenance, paving. That would at least, increase a little bit. to help the towns out, because if it's just flat, the towns are going backwards and you know, it's only gonna come out of property tax, or the roads won't be maintained, which will end up costing more.
Yeah, I can put something together for sure, come back in at another time.
The other piece I want to point out as far as our testimony goes and the budget pieces that come in, and we are asking maintenance to come back in. We weren't able to finish that. I don't think we finished that particular piece. When we look at the questions that we're asking in our charge from the appropriations committee and from the speaker's office, you know, that biggest chunk is, you know, maintenance is obviously where we probably should be spending some of our most significant questions and time, and then looking at the sections. But what I do find is the things we can most easily grasp a hold of are the projects in our towns, like the bike ped, the bicycles, the transportation alternatives, the particular ones that we can see, feel, touch. We ask lots of questions about. I'm looking for some additional help when we revisit some of these areas, when we know that they are 30% of the entire budget. We owe it to what our charge is to dig further into those areas, like questions you were asking earlier today. When 30% of the money is in maintenance, we should be spending probably some more time in that to at least understand it. That doesn't mean there's anything wrong in there, just to understand it. But that's why I wanted to point out the sort of percentage of your T-fund dollars that are there. That's in the oversight piece and the charge from the speaker and from the appropriations piece. So that's another part that I was interested in doing. And otherwise, go ahead, Representative.
Is there, I think the Black Book tells us how much the state paid in overtime, right?
I believe that'll be in the black book, right?
We don't get a Black Book number?
It's online. I can show you how to find that.
We can't get one physically in our hands, huh?
Not,
All the same stuff is there online, no? It's all in there?
I believe so. But that'd be a great question for the agency, but my understanding is that it is currently online. That is where you'll have to find it.
Do we need to spend any time in the bottom portion of this piece?
Yeah, sure. I'll point out the one-time appropriations or appropriation as it is now, for the central garage relocation. The budget right now has 1.36 million, which is sort of the state portion of the money needed to do the central garage, new central garage, which you've heard about. This money is coming from, if you go down to the last box, you'll see from the insurance reserve fund of the same amount. So the T-fund will be getting a transfer from that fund, which will then be used as one-time funds to pay for this central garage. The other,
Where was that case?
Is that overpayment of insurance? Is that what that is?
I'm not entirely sure what all goes into this fund. I believe this is from the payments we would have received for when the current central garage flooded.
Oh,
But I
okay.
can-
All right,
I
it's a
can-
whole different thing, okay.
Yeah. And then the last one, well, Pay Act there, we do that every year. That one's not new. And then underneath of this, there's a proposal, and this is a topic we can discuss more at a different point if you'll want to do a transfer for the EVSE charging at ACCD. You'll remember that the money coming from the infrastructure fee that's levied on EVs and plug-in hybrids goes to this program run by ACCD to do charging stations.
And so that's showing, again, another transfer from those funds.
Yes, so
It's more than previously.
I'd have to look into that. I think the thing to note here is that previously, and this sort of gets into a little bit of the language and the minutia, which we can discuss, is that we used to do sort of, last year we did a one-time appropriation of these funds to the Agency of Transportation, and then they sent the money to ACCD, because within statute, essentially, we're not allowed to send money, transportation monies, to other agencies. It has to go to the Agency of Transportation first. The proposal in the budget, there's some language that would essentially amend that statute to allow a portion of T funds to go to ACCD for this specific purpose of doing the charging here. So that is a policy decision for you all to make, whether you want it to be how it was before or this new language, and we can get into it and bring Damien in and sort of discuss it in more details. But I will just mention that there, it is showing up differently this year because of that.
Representative Burke?
Yeah. At some point, can we find out how many vehicles that were, have sort of a more detailed accounting of that money and how much was brought in and how much is, where is it going?
For the EV infrastructure fee?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you what that's collected, and ACCD will have to come in and talk about how they use the funds, but I can tell you what it has collected.
And if there's extra funds that V-Trans is collecting, where do those go, et cetera?
We can look
Does
into
all,
that.
does all the money go to ACC?
I believe it should all be going to ACCD.
Okay.
Yeah.
ACCD, if I'm remembering correctly, they were having trouble getting that money out to do this job. Is that right? Last year?
That's a question we'd have to ask them. I'm not sure.
I remember they, yeah,
Thanks.
thanks.
Yeah, just to sort of clarify that, they were divvied up by county and some counties had maxed out and some counties hadn't or even, so, it would be good, to get them in here just to see how the program's going. They had run into a few barriers to getting some of the money out in certain counties, so, that'll be good to have discussions with them.
All right. Michelle, here you
Think that is most of what I wanted to mention on this page. We can jump to the comparison if you want. So this document just looks at the FY26 budget as passed, and I'll make note of that. This does not include the reduction that happened during the rescission plan. I did not have time to sort of go through and add those in. So this is just the as passed FY26 budget to the GovRex FY27 budget. And this is just sort of the totals of each line, and then the comparison numbers on the right-hand side there. So you can see the increase or decrease from last year, then what percentage it increased or decreased. The larger ones here, as you've heard, paving, total increase of 44% over last year, $45 million. Interstate bridges saw an increase as well. Traffic and safety, I think you heard about that one, 17.6% increase. Total program development increase of 12.7%, up $52 million in total. Some larger increases moving down. The environmental policy and sustainability saw a 57% increase. I think that has to do with shifting of people around, but I'll double check on that one, and when they come in, if they haven't already, can speak to where that increase is coming from. You also see some larger numbers, but rest areas was decreased 62%. Again, we can look into why that is. Maintenance saw a slight decrease. Total V-Trans programs, they're in the blue bar. Looking at, yes.
One of the, make sure I understanding on it, because it's as passed, when the rescissions took place in the fall and whatnot, I know at least in the next one, a good chunk of maintenance. So the difference might not be quite, if they had to adjust and things would may have gone down.
Right.
In some cases,
Yeah.
these differences are less or more.
Yeah.
Because a word change is made.
And I can go through in the future and show you it after the revision. This is just, I didn't have the time to go through it.
I don't know, I thought in maintenance in particular, and I'm not, I understand why that's not there. I was just, where some of those, that reduction in force was in maintenance.
Yeah, I believe so.
So I you know, I'm not sure where it will affect. What I was trying to get at, I guess, is when you look at things that have gone up or gone down, it's not, we're not entirely set yet that that's exactly what we're comparing against, because some areas did get cut. And we'll see that in the future. But it is still a tool to look at for right now. This is the guide.
Moving down into the town highway programs, as was mentioned, there you see that 2.7% increase for the town highway structures, the town highway class 2 roadways, and the town highway aid program. Those are all based on formulas and statute.
I have asked for more testimony that, and I think we saw some of it yesterday, town highway bridges, about how the IIJA funds and how there was a significant increase in build out and how that program is coming towards an end. And we want to be careful that our towns view that as a change in policy or direction or funding priority. That's not, I don't understand that to be, that's what's happened there. And I want to make sure that that's part of this whole committee discussion for, as we go into it, that we really understand that. Did we make a decision to pull back and it's funding of town highway bridges, or was it really the end of a program? And that's what I thought we'd seen for testimony, that it was the end, the ending of a program that had been from some significant general funds money that we put into it years ago. But I don't want to let people run out with the narrative that we've pulled away from town highway bridges if that's not the case. Yes.
Is it the case? Could it be that there's just less bridges that need work? Is that we can assume, or are they just getting kind of pictionated?
That'd be a great question for the agency. I don't know that I can really
Okay,
speak to
alright.
that. If they haven't come in already, I'm sure they can come in and talk about this program
Yeah.
specifically and.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't.
No, yeah, they're good.
The need is another part of the community discussion you had at some point, but that's what Senator Westman wanted to add into the T-bill last year, was sort of, there is no white book for the entire town and municipalities' needs. There is a white book that really helps outline the needs of the state, but there is a program underway about sort of how do we quantify the assets that are out there and what their real need is. We talk and assume that there's a huge need from towns, and we believe that, but we don't have any real quantified program to know that. And I don't know if it's cost prohibitive to come up with a program like that or not. So that's something that the agency is working on based on what language was put in the T-bill that we passed last year. It was 2 years for them to, I believe, 2 years for them to work on that and kind of come back with recommendations, whether that can be done or not. So the need is assumed and probably believed and probably true, but we don't have a quantifiable way of saying what are all the town's needs and how much money would we possibly need to fill those needs.
I know my towns, I don't see anything happening in them, and I know they have needs, so that would be a good conversation to have at some point. Let's stick with it.
I do think that what we put in terms of the multiplier, that's very clear there on the two, or the inflationary piece of 2.7. Those numbers aren't going to go back. Now they've got to build off the 7.3 in town highway structures, and it'll build up from there. That was an accomplishment for us last year, or I think for last year, but it does put increased pressure on the T fund because we're taking T fund money and putting it in the towns. And I think we all agree to it very clearly, but it was part of the need to fill that $33 million hole. Part of it we added to. And we did just hear about the municipal mitigation this morning. There was some mentions about something to dig into the transportation board on some potential changes, but it was so low on the money list that I haven't put any priority to that yet.
Yes, we're at section 15.
Questions?
So, just a comment, actually, I find this very helpful to get a comparison between years. And I would ask the chair to ask those that present to us to have this same type of thing. It's a lot harder to understand, at least in my point of view, to understand the dollars that were thrown out, Interstate, $51.3 million, 33 projects. Well, how much was it before? It's this comparison, I find it difficult to follow without a year-to-year comparison. I'd like a 3-year, but I won't press for that. At least the year-to-year would be great. Thank you.
We have guests in the room that may or may not have heard that kind of floating out there. As a sort of something we can talk about and do. Everything that we do, I'm not sure that everybody understands it, but if there is a process to it, that anything that comes up in committee, the first place we go is to the agency. And the second place we go to, or the first place might be to ledge council, and then the agency, or at the same time, both, and then the JFO, and then whatever advocates may or may not have a position on that is sort of how everything that comes up to the committee that flows through the vice chair and I goes in that pretty much direction. What's the agency's comment? What's the ledge council's comment? What does JFO bring us for information on it? And then who else would be affected by it and should come in and testify? That's sort of the approach to everything. So every suggestion like that goes right through that process. We don't want to put cost prohibitive work onto them, but we want to provide members with the information they need to help shape these policies. I am also emphasizing for the newer members. My memory is a way that you don't know whether you're making a difference or what you're doing or whether you understand it. There are things on this page that very clearly came from decisions we made last year. And that pointed out, like the EV money, the ACCD transfer in those town highway programs. And if you start digging in more, a lot of the work on other parts of it, you can't see it on the day-to-day all the time, but for newer members, I would say that you did help make decisions that changed this spreadsheet would be different if we hadn't done that. Or we did do more, whatever it might be. So yes.
I'll just point out the infrastructure fee on EVs and plug-in hybrids was from the administration, I think, 2 years ago. So, and we agreed with it.
I
think it was more the Senate.
So
Oh, well, maybe.
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
That was
Yeah.
before I was in this seat. That was when I was down representing Fuser seat.
you were sleeping, you were sleeping.
You were way down at the other end.
Be careful what's in store for you. That's the hot street.
Future looks bright for you, Chris.
Oh, be careful.
What else about this sheet do we have questions on, or other piece that we may or may want to do? And I did have a suggestion of percentage of T funds on that other one, if that's possible. I don't know if there's room to shorten it in there, make it small.
I can make it work. I'm sure I can make that work.
And we want to look at somehow we have to look at some trends. Let's see what it's doing over a few years. Maybe not in this format, maybe in some other, maybe in a different way. Anybody else have any other comments or questions on any information that they see here? None from the peanut gallery? Okay. Logan, thanks for bringing it in.
Of course, anytime.
And switch to sort of committee discussion on a particular area. There is this memo that you all saw, and Candace Elmquist, the CFO for the agency, came in and presented on how the budget was built. And I am referring back to it, at least maybe committee discussion. Maybe we won't have a lot of discussion, but we will at least want to make sure that you guys know where I'm at least thinking at it. And we are looking at the review of kind of what happened. And as first major accomplishment, we spent all of last year, and lots of people, including many that are in this room and special guests are in the room right now, and all over this building, making known that transportation funding was headed for a cliff. And you all accomplished that because it is on the news, it is in the radio, it was on television, it's in the news reports, it's on Vermont This Week, it's on the in the reports from the VLCT, it's in the multiple activists, multiple lobbyists that put it in their reports. I encourage you to continue to push that dialogue in all of yours. So we have that attention. The Speaker's office is well aware of it. The next step as appropriations is getting their budget presentations now. They just finished the BAA and they're starting. And I understanding right in the preview that transportation was one of the first, topics that was presented in appropriations. Agency hasn't come in to present, but in the overall presentation of the governor's budget, it's in the executive section in the very beginning. So there's a lot of attention, there's real awareness, and now there is a recommended governor's budget. And we are going to have to now figure out how we're going to respond to it. Fair enough. What I want to point out, a couple of the tricky parts of it is everybody knows that there was a $33 million hole. And when I get off base, I'm expecting a couple of people to tell me that, if I don't do this right, but there was a $33 million hole to fill the gap for this year. It came from a variety of different places, which is outlined, sort of partially outlined in this memo about where that $33 million hole came from. The 12 million of it came from this very newly introduced to us, not new, but this indirect cost ratio that we hadn't seen before, and we have to continue to indirect cost rate. And that's projected to save 12+ million by using federal money to pay overhead expenses within the agency. But it's also expected to be used this year and next year. There is a sort of, my understanding, and I'll hopefully get corrected, that means that we're not using that federal money for a project somewhere. We're using that money to pay overhead. We usually use that federal money to pay for a project. So that is something I want to make sure you're aware that is not how we usually use federal money, but it's how we needed to use it, or how it was proposed to solve this part of this hole.
Isn't that money used for kind of a match thing? Right, that money that
In
we're.
effect, that, I guess I would say that is the match money, that we are turning it into overhead money.
So we're taking from that.
Some might argue that that is money that is not being spent on projects that would normally be spent out on work, construction, and other pieces that is being spent to cover overhead. I see a lot of nods, so I think I'm getting that one right. And so, yes, it is in effect matched money that's not being used for matching on a project. Also out of that, go ahead.
I would just say, I think there's a recognition by the administration and V-Trans, because they seem to only do this when things get squeezed. And then, there's at least evidence that we did it in the past and then we stopped doing it. So that to me says there should be an expectation that we're being a little squeezed and that, this wouldn't be a permanent. I assume other states do this on a permanent basis, and maybe, but it sounds like it's not permanent change. But that would be a
The
question.
testimony that we did here said they were planning on doing it at least this year and next year. So it's just, go ahead.
The governor wanted to pull back 10 million-ish back from education. Is that gonna go through, or is that something that's gonna get
So
stuck?
we'll help decide, and I'm gonna get to that, because we start with a $33 million hole in the first 12 million. The biggest chunk is this indirect, I'm not gonna say it right? Indirect cost rate.
Yeah.
That's 12 million. Now, if you sort of go through and you look at it and you say, okay, that's 12. Then there's a reduction in force. 4.1 million from the fall and 3.3 million in this current budget recommendation. So that's $8 million. So you got 12 million and plus, and 8 million and plus, that's $20 million. And then there is the piece where we took almost 5.4 million in highway projects that are in the white book that we have scaled back out of the white book and said we're not doing. Okay, so you're taking 12 plus 8 plus nearly 6. All right, so that's 26 million more or less. And then we said, okay, we're cutting back on aviation by 1 million, rail by 3 million, and then maintenance by 600, 500, 400, another couple million. That's how we filled the $33 million hole. That's how I want to, this recommended budget is to fill that $33 million hole. Okay. And charging credit cards, yep, another 2 million. But the hole was not filled. The recommendation of the budget that we're going to deal with is not filled by keeping the transportation money in transportation, by reducing the amount we send to education. We did not use the 10 million, and this budget does not use that $10 million to fill that $33 million hole. It then uses the 10 million after how we just filled the hole. Not by we, I just keep saying that, but that's not what I mean. I mean, the budget fills that 33 million, and then the budget recommends the budget is saying, take that $10 million and leverage it against the full federal match that's available and put more work on the ground to deal with the decaying infrastructure. So the budget takes projects out of the highway, which we're going to get testimony from the chief engineer about which ones sort of came out. And then we accelerated, the budget accelerates. I apologize I can't stop saying that. We've accelerated a whole bunch of projects, which we're also going to get testimony on, to then drive work onto the ground as soon as possible this year, responding to heavy pressure that our years of paving had gone down significantly over the last couple of years. And this use of that 10 million has helped increase the paving by about 50% for this year. But I want to make sure that everybody's understanding that the filling of the $33 million hole isn't coming from the $10 million purchase and use reduction of what we send to education. That is being used to maximize more federal money. And that was my purpose of having committee discussion on that. How important it is to you each individually is up to you. What I want you to say is we are going to more meetings with the rest of the Ways and Means and Appropriations and our liaison to appropriations and the Speaker's office with explaining to them, and the JFO is going to explain it all over the place, the appropriations. That's what we need to understand. That's the governor's proposal. And the 10 million is not part of that $33 million hole. It is about leveraging more projects. We will debate what's good or bad or should or shouldn't be changed, but we at least need to make sure, I think we need to make sure that we're all coming from the same sort of baseline. And if this doesn't make sense to you, or does, I felt it was important enough to go over it, to make sure that we're on the same page. And if I didn't explain it right, or we need to have them come back, whether it be the JFO or the agency, will do that again. But when we have testimony, and I'm expecting on this particular memo, I'm looking for the explanation on every single line that says how we built this budget. That's part of what I think is my responsibility. Then we'll figure out whether we do or don't, can or not, moving forward. But we should understand what we did. We asked for this big attention. We asked for a commitment to help solve the transportation funding problems. This is what's been recommended. We should really understand what actually is recommended. And then you should be talking to whomever you do about whether or not, how we're going to move forward. Did that convey what we were trying to Brandable? Yeah. So, Representative White.
No, go ahead.
Okay, couple questions. First of all, Chair Walker, you are referring to Candace Elmquist's memo. Is that the January 21st?
Testimony.
The creation? She's got, there are like 6 documents from her. But is that the right one?
The January
21st, Agency
Yes.
of Transportation, and then it's like first one-time revenue sources on page 2, the 6-page document. Okay,
Yeah.
thank
This
you.
is the one I'm referring to there, in case that
Yes,
helps you.
that's it. Great,
Yep.
thank you. My second question, on this kind of unusual accounting plan that the agency has to take federal money to pay normal operating expenses as opposed to using it to match bigger federal dollars. I'm just wondering if Logan from JFO had anything to say about that, just kind of historically, like, I'm just wondering, like, from someone who works in finance full-time, like, is this a practice we should be avoiding? You know, we've done it in the past in tighter times. I'm just wondering if there's anything you want to opine on for us about that particular procedure or plan?
So I guess I'll say this, and with the caveat that I'm not an expert on federal reimbursements by any means. This is a relatively unused tool in budget creation for the Agency of Transportation. We, to my knowledge, in the past, I'll say 15 years, could be longer than that, I've used it maybe once before. That was during, I believe, 2022, right after COVID, when there was a lot of federal funds coming in. We used some federal money in an indirect cost rate. Other than that, I don't know the time passage, and maybe if you went back far enough, we could find a time where the agency has made use of this. I think the reason we haven't made use of this is because it's not the most attractive option for our use of our federal funds. Whether we should be using it or not using it, I will leave that all up to you all to decide. But it is not a common tool that is used when you're creating the transportation budget.
And I just have one more comment question. So when we're looking at the 2027 budget and looking at really the big areas, and paving is going up by 50%. So, and that's 24 million of T-Fund dollars and 123 million of federal dollars. So it looks like we're taking full advantage of federal matching there. But I guess my question on that is, I mean, it's a really big number. Will we be able to achieve that 50% increase in labor and projects on the paving side? I mean, we
No.
understand all the reasons why we don't want to get behind on paving, and we were behind last year, but this is a pretty significant increase. So asking vendors to do that, asking the agency to oversee those, I'm just wondering, is that realistic for us to, in which case, maybe we could pull $1 million or $2 million back from T-Fund, the T-Fund column there to put somewhere else if we're looking to.
I think if you had the pavers in there, they could say they.
No problem.
Sleep.
Yeah.
Oh, we will
I'm not
have,
asking.
and we will hear, we will hear testimony, we can hear both from the agency and from the paper, so. That is exactly where we go next, after we make sure that you're totally understanding what we're at, and that is where we go next, is why we'll hear from the agency, we'll hear from. Whatever term we want to give them, the advocates or papers in this case, or affected parties. And those are the kind of questions that we will be asking as we go through the budget. Maybe we should have started here, but it wasn't always, we got to start where we start. We're not in February yet, so we've got some time to really understand it and dig into it. But I wanted to make sure we were at a baseline of understanding how it was built. Representative Casey.
I'm sorry, I don't know if this address this or maybe it needs to go somewhere else, but the before COVID, or actually because of COVID, we had a lot of extra money. Did we start a bunch of new programs because of COVID? Do they still exist today? Are we gonna? Does anybody know that?
Gigantic question that we're not gonna be able to answer in this few 4 minutes, but I appreciate the question. Because everybody across the whole state government is wrestling with how do you fund things now that we don't have that level of money, but.
I think to answer somewhat of your question, this program we did start, CEV incentives, but that's no longer. That was
That was the only one that you could.
about 21 million, I think that started somewhere.
That one's kind of backed off.
I'm totally into digging into that question. I think it's a very good question from that perspective of, is there more money out there to be saved? But for this, I'm definitely looking to make sure that we understand how it was built. And that's where we go next, is what are we spending the money on? So that's my answer to that. I want to make sure for just now, before we break, that you understand that part of it. And then that is the question. What else could not be adjusted? I'm sorry.
I just a comment on the 10 million from the purchase and use that, this budget has tried to bring back to transportation. And that's a question we've been dealing with for a number of years. I just want to point out that the way the administration put that together makes it really easy for it not to happen. because we have a list of exactly what wouldn't happen. And it's not intermingled through all this. And if it was, then it would be a really hard thing to understand. We understand the benefit, then we would understand you know what I mean? It's an easy piece to peel off.
Benefit
And-
from that town.
But that, yeah, that's from that time. But I mean, you know, I mean, that's, I think a decision, you know, that we can struggle with here, but obviously it's gonna happen over in approps too, so. Just be an there'll be a lot more discussion on it. But the fact that we know exactly what it's for, you know, then you can make a good argument for or against, however you want to go. I'm not saying one way or the other. But if it was intermingled through all here, that would be very, very messy.
It's interesting to look at it, so, okay,
I just thought Michelle had her hand up.
oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
You're,
When you, Representative Casey asked the question about
Michelle
COVID created programs, Michelle Boomhauer for the record. Trans. One of the things that we've often spoken to, and you see it in our public transit budget, is there was a huge influx of funding for public transit agencies. That really is this very most specific program that received a huge boost for COVID. There are other areas we can talk about, but that's super significant. And, you know, as you can see, it's very difficult to pare that back down after it's been infused, but I just want to highlight that.
okay,